I got back from the funeral and told my son and daughter-in-law I inherited 3 farms, but I stopped at the door when I heard their voices and what they were planning for me. It froze my blood. Before I tell you what I heard and what I did next, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever felt underestimated by your own family. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd like to know who's listening to my story. My name is Morgan Byron. I'm 70 years old, and that day, the day everything changed, my hands were aching. I gripped the plastic steering wheel of my 2004 pickup truck so hard my knuckles had turned white. I'd been driving for 10 hours straight with rest stops every 2 hours because my arthritis was flaring up. 10 hours on the interstate fueled by bitter gas station coffee and the stale, lingering scent of funeral home lilies that seemed stuck in my jacket. I was coming back from Wyoming, a place I hadn't seen in 20 years. I was coming back from burying my father, Hector. Hector and we weren't close. He was a hard man. A man of few words, and most of them were sharp. He was a miner, a man who believed emotion was weakness and that a daughter's job was to listen, not to speak. When I married my Michael, he didn't approve. When I decided to work as a quality control supervisor at the auto plant in Ohio, instead of pursuing business like he wanted, he called me soft. Told me I was wasting my potential. We hadn't spoken in years. When his lawyer called me, I almost didn't go. But Michael, God rest his soul, he always believed in forgiveness. Even from his hospital bed before the pneumonia took him 8 months ago, he whispered, "Go, Morgan. He's still your father." So I went. I sat in the back of a cold, empty chapel in Laramie. The wind outside howled like it was morning, but inside it was just silence. I listened to a preacher who clearly didn't know my father talk about a man I didn't recognize. Hector Byron was a pillar of this community, he said, reading from notes that must have come from somewhere generic. A hard-working man who valued tradition and family. I almost laughed. Almost. I was the only family there. The chapel was one of those old ones with wooden pews that creaked when you shifted your weight. There were maybe 5 other people scattered in the rows, probably neighbors who felt obligated to show up. No one spoke to me. After the service, after they lowered the simple pine casket into the frozen ground, the lawyer pulled me aside. Harrison Cole, young man maybe 30 with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a coat too thin for the Wyoming cold and kept shifting from foot to foot. "Mrs. Byron," he said, holding out a thick manila envelope. "I was your father's attorney for the last 5 years. He was very specific. He left this for you. I expected a bill. I really did. Maybe a final letter of disappointment. One last reminder that I'd been a failure in his eyes." I took the envelope with trembling hands. My fingers were numb from the cold, and I fumbled with the flap. "There's more," Harrison said quietly. "But you should read this first. In private." I couldn't drive yet. My hands were shaking too badly. I pulled my truck over onto the gravel shoulder of Highway 287, the engine idling the endless prairie stretching out in front of me like a gray ocean. The wind rocked the truck gently, a rhythmic reminder that I was still here, still breathing. I ripped open the envelope. It wasn't a letter. It was a will. And it wasn't 1 page, it was 20. The first line stopped my heart. "I, Hector Byron, leave all my worldly possessions to my only daughter, Morgan Byron." All his possessions. I almost laughed again. That meant his rusty toolbox, his 10-year-old television set, and the rented trailer he'd died in, right? But I kept reading. "My possessions, namely..." My eyes scanned the legal jargon, trying to make sense of it. 3 farms. Not 1-3. I unfolded the plat map Harrison had included in the envelope. Vast tracts of land, hundreds of acres out in the high plains near Gillette. I remembered that land vaguely. Daddy used to drag me out there as a child, trying to teach me about minerals and geology. I hated it. It was just useless empty prairie to my 10-year-old eyes. But Harrison's voice echoed in my head from something he'd said as I was leaving the cemetery. "Mrs. Byron, that land isn't just land. It's currently leased to a natural gas exploration company. The mineral rights alone, they're substantial." And that wasn't all. I turned the page, my breath catching. My property located at 14 Lighthouse Road, Cutler, Maine. A house Daddy had a house by the sea. I blinked at the words. Hector hated the ocean. He told me once it was too much water all trying to kill you. Why would he own a house in Maine? I skipped past the legal descriptions, my fingers fumbling with the last page. It was an asset summary compiled by Harrison's law office. Total estimated value. My vision blurred. It looked like a typo. It had to be a typo. $18 million. 1-8, followed by 6 zeros. $18 million. I thought of the sunroom, that cold, miserable glass prison I'd been living in for the last 8 months. Let me take you back to how I ended up there. When my Michael passed away so suddenly, so unfairly from pneumonia that took him in less than a week, my life ended too. I felt like someone had scooped out my insides and left me hollow. Our house, the one we'd bought together 40 years ago, the one where we'd raised Robert, the one with Michael's rose bushes in the backyard, it had been in his name, a technicality that never mattered when we were young and in love and thought we'd live forever. But it mattered when he was gone. My son Robert and his wife Susan explained it to me gently. Or maybe it wasn't gently, I can't remember. I was drowning in grief, barely able to get out of bed. They explained that the house was now legally theirs through inheritance, and they needed to make some changes. "We're struggling, Mom," Robert had said, not meeting my eyes. "The mortgage, the bills, we need to streamline." So at 70 years old, I moved in with them. I wasn't a mother anymore. I wasn't a wife. I was a tenant. No, I was less than a tenant. At least tenants pay rent and have rights. I lived in their sunroom, a small space off the kitchen, all glass and wicker furniture. It was freezing in the winter when the Ohio wind cut through those single-pane windows like knives. It was boiling in the summer when the afternoon sun turned it into a greenhouse. My bed was a pull-out sofa. The mattress was thin and the springs dug into my back. My belongings were in 2 cardboard boxes tucked under the patio table they used for storage. I became a ghost in their home. I tried to stay small, tried not to be a burden. I washed my own dishes. I folded my own blanket every morning, tucking it into the sofa so neat you'd barely know someone slept there. I kept my toiletries in a plastic grocery bag that I carried to the bathroom and back. But I still heard Susan's sighs when I walked through the kitchen to use the bathroom at night. The floorboards creaked, and I'd hear her irritated exhale from their bedroom upstairs. I saw Robert wince when I asked if I could watch the evening news on their TV in the living room. They were good kids, I told myself. They were just stressed, just struggling financially. But now, holding this envelope, this impossible gift from a father I never understood, everything was going to change. My heart, which I thought had turned to stone when Michael died, started to beat with a painful, unfamiliar hope. I wasn't a burden anymore. I wasn't a ghost. I could buy my own place. A small apartment, nothing fancy. I could have my own kitchen again. My own bed. A bed that didn't fold in half. And I could help them. I could help Robert and Susan. I knew they were drowning in debt. I'd heard the whispered arguments late at night through the thin walls, the panicked discussions about mortgages and credit cards. This money, this miracle from a man I never understood, it wasn't just for me. It was for us. For family. I put the truck back in gear and pulled onto the highway. The 10-hour drive back to Ohio suddenly didn't seem so long. The landscape blurred past mountains, giving way to plains, to farmland to the gray industrial sprawl of the Midwest. I wasn't just driving back to the sunroom. I was driving back as their savior. I pulled onto Cedar Street just as the sun was setting. Their house, the modest suburban home with the sagging front porch and the lawn that needed mowing, looked exactly the same. The same peeling paint on the shutters. The same cracked concrete path leading to the front door. Robert always forgot to mow on Tuesdays. I parked my old truck at the curb, the engine ticking as it cooled. My hands were still gripping the envelope like it was a winning lottery ticket. $18 million. I could see it all so clearly. I'd walk in, sit them down at that scratched kitchen table and tell them. I'd watch the worry lines between Robert's eyebrows disappear. I'd see Susan actually smile at me for the first time in months. A real smile, not that tight, polite grimace she usually gave me. "It's okay," I'd say. "Everything is going to be okay. The mortgage, the credit cards, everything, I'm taking care of it." And then I'd buy my own little place. Maybe a 1-bedroom apartment a few blocks away. Close enough to visit, far enough to not be a burden. I'd have Sunday dinners with them, the kind Michael and I used to host. I'd cook Robert's favorite pot roast. Maybe Susan and I could even become friends. My hand reached for the door handle. And then I heard it. I was about to knock when the voices stopped me. Susan's voice, sharp and angry, cutting through the thin wood of the front door like a blade. Robert, I'm telling you I can't take it anymore. I froze. My hand hovered in mid-air knuckles, inches from the door. He just wanders around the house like a ghost, she said. Her voice was crystal clear. He's always there. I feel like I'm running a charity ward, not a home. Wait, My mind stuttered. Then I realized she was talking about... She thought I was a man, no. No, she meant my blood ran cold as understanding hit. She was talking about me. Just using the wrong pronoun in her anger, or maybe Robert had corrected her and I'd missed it, or... It didn't matter. What mattered was what she said next. She shuffles around. She sighs. I can't even have my coffee in peace without her hovering. Jenna, please keep your voice down. Robert's voice muffled and tired. She's my mother. She's grieving. She's got nowhere else to go. Susan, I had to stop thinking of her as Jenna that was a different person entirely, let out a laugh. It wasn't a laugh. It was a short, bitter bark. Grieving. We're all grieving. We grieved when we had to sell our house. We're grieving now that we're broke because of her. But we have our own lives to live, Robert. We have bills to pay. She paused. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Her 71st birthday is next month. Susan continued, her voice suddenly flat and decisive. We'll tell her then. We have to. Tell her what Susan... Robert's voice was weak. He already knew. He was just afraid to hear it. That we found her a place. Golden Meadows has an opening. It's clean. It's safe. It's what we can afford. The envelope in my hand suddenly felt like a block of ice. Golden Meadows. I knew that name. Everybody in our part of Ohio knew that name. It wasn't a golden anything. It was the state-run facility, the long, low brick building out by the highway with the chain-link fence around the concrete patio, the one that smelled like bleach and boiled vegetables when you drove past with the windows down. It wasn't assisted living. It wasn't a retirement community with shuffleboard and book clubs. It was the end of the line. The place you went when you had no money and no one who wanted you. The place people went to die. Susan, Robert stammered. That's a home. It's what we can afford, she snapped. He's a financial black hole, Robert. She meant she. She contributes nothing, Susan continued, her voice rising. She just sits in that sunroom eating our food, driving up our electric bill, costing us money we don't have. It's her or us, and I'm choosing us. End of discussion. My hand fell from the door. The envelope in my other hand, the one with $18 million, suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. They were planning to throw me away. The woman they thought was a broke, useless old burden who'd come back from her father's funeral with nothing but debt. A cold, hard feeling settled in my chest, replacing the hope I'd felt just moments before. They wanted to see how much of a burden I was. I'd show them. My hand kept resting on the doorframe, but I didn't knock. I didn't go inside. Instead, I quietly stepped back. My feet found the porch steps, then the cracked concrete path, then the sidewalk. I got back into my truck, sat in the driver's seat, stared at my weathered hands on the steering wheel. The cheap fabric of my coat was warm from my body heat, but the paper inside the envelope felt foreign. Heavy, heavier than just paper. It felt like a weapon. I thought about what had just happened. About the conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. Golden Meadows. Financial black hole. It's her or us. Something inside me, something that had been dormant since Michael died, since I'd become small and quiet and grateful just to have a roof over my head, began to wake up. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was clarity. I pulled my old flip phone from my coat pocket. The screen glowed pale blue in the darkening truck cab. I scrolled through my contacts. There were only 5 names. Michael, I couldn't delete it, not yet. Robert, Susan, Dr. Chen, my doctor. And the last number I'd added just today, Harrison Cole, attorney at law. I checked the time. 6:47 p.m. in Ohio. That meant 4:47 p.m. in Wyoming. My fingers moved before my brain could catch up. The phone rang once, twice. Hello? Harrison's voice, slightly surprised. Mrs. Byron, Mr. Cole, I said, and I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I need your help. Of course, is everything all right? Did you have questions about the estate? I need you to do something for me, I said, watching the lights come on in Robert and Susan's living room. I could see their shadows moving behind the curtains. I need you to sell one of the farms, the smallest one, and I need you to do it now." There was a pause on the line. "Mrs. Byron, selling a property like that takes time. Even a quick sale would need—" "I don't care how much time it usually takes," I interrupted. "Find someone who wants it. Find someone who wants it badly enough to move fast. Tell them I'll give them a deal. I need the money liquid, and I need it in a trust, an irrevocable trust, one that only I can access. Can you do that?" Another pause longer this time. "Mrs. Byron," Harrison's voice was careful, "may I ask what's happening?" "They're planning to put me in a home," I said quietly. "A state-run facility, Golden Meadows, and I need to make sure that no matter what they do, they can't touch this money. Not as my guardians, not as my power of attorney, not as anything." "I see." His voice changed, became sharper, more professional. "I can do that. I know someone who's been trying to buy that parcel for over a year. Your father always refused. If you're willing to sell at a reasonable price, I can have the paperwork ready by tomorrow morning." "Do it," I said. "I'll take $4.5 million for it, even if it's worth more. I need it done." "Consider it done. And Mrs. Byron?" "Yes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry you're going through this." I closed my eyes. "Just protect the money, Mr. Cole. Make sure they can't get to it." "They won't. I promise you that." I ended the call and sat in the darkness of the truck, $4.5 million soon to be locked away where Robert and Susan could never touch it. And I still had $13.5 million worth of property they didn't know about. But they didn't need to know any of that. Not yet. First, I needed to see exactly how deep their cruelty went. I picked up the envelope, carefully folded it, and tucked it deep into the inner pocket of my coat. Then I smoothed my hair, took a breath, and walked back toward that front door. This time I knocked. The voices inside stopped instantly. I heard hurried footsteps. The door opened, and there was Susan, her face flushed, her eyes too bright. "Oh, Mom, you're back." She stepped aside quickly, her hands fluttering. "We didn't hear you drive up. Come in, come in. How was the drive?" I shuffled past her into the hallway, letting my shoulders slump, making my movements slow and tired. "Long," I said quietly. "Very long." Robert appeared from the kitchen, his face pale and guilty. "Hey, Mom, how was everything the funeral?" I didn't answer right away. I let them watch me stand there, a tired old woman in a worn coat, holding nothing but the grief they could see on my face. "It's done," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. He's gone." Susan's expression shifted into something that might have been sympathy if I didn't know better. "Oh, sweetheart, of course. You must be exhausted. Let me get you some water. Have you eaten?" I shook my head slowly. The less I said right now, the better. Robert stepped forward, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw my little boy in his face. The child I'd raised, the one who used to cry when he scraped his knee, the one I'd taught to ride a bike. "Come sit down, Mom," he said gently. "Please." They guided me to the kitchen table, the same scratched surface where just days ago they'd been planning my exile. I sat down heavily, and Susan actually pulled out the chair for me as if I were an invalid. She poured water into a glass, my glass the one plastic cup they'd given me to use, and set it in front of me. "Take your time," she said, sitting across from me. Robert stood by the counter, his hands jammed in his pockets. They waited. They were actually waiting for me to volunteer the information. Finally, after a long sip of water, I spoke. "The lawyer was there," I said slowly. "After the funeral, Harrison Cole. He gave me some papers." Susan leaned forward slightly. I saw her hands tighten on the table. "Papers?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "About the estate," I continued. "About what my father left." The air in the kitchen changed, became charged. Susan wasn't even pretending to look sympathetic anymore. Her eyes were focused sharp. "And?" Robert asked. His voice cracked slightly. I let the silence stretch, let them squirm. Then I delivered the lie I'd been rehearsing in my head during that long drive home. "I'm afraid," I started, then let my voice break. "I'm afraid I have bad news." Susan's face went very still. "Bad news. What kind of bad news?" I looked down at my hands, worn and spotted with age. Hands that had worked 40 years at that auto plant. Hands that had held my baby son. Hands that had held Michael's as he took his last breath. "The estate?" I said quietly. "The will. It's not It's not what anyone expected." Robert moved closer, his shadow falling across the table. "What do you mean, Mom?" I made my voice shake. It wasn't hard. 8 months of grief had taught me how to sound broken. "There's nothing," I whispered. "In fact, it's worse than nothing." The kitchen seemed to shrink. I could hear the refrigerator humming, the clock ticking on the wall. "Nothing," Susan repeated slowly, each syllable crisp, dangerous. "He had 3 farms." I continued staring at the scratched table surface. "But they were worthless, just empty land. And he mortgaged them, years ago. Took out huge loans against all 3 properties." I let that sink in, watching Susan's face from the corner of my eye. "The lawyer Harrison, he showed me the paperwork. The banks are taking them back. All of them. There's nothing left." Robert made a sound like he'd been punched. He sagged against the kitchen counter. But Susan wasn't disappointed. She was furious. "So you're telling me," she said, her voice dangerously low, "that you drove all that way, and there's nothing at all?" "It's worse than that," I said, and this was the part that would really sell it. The killing blow. I looked up at them, made my eyes wide and frightened. "Harrison said that my father, he hadn't paid property taxes on any of that land. Not in over 5 years. The IRS, the state of Wyoming, they're going to come after the estate for back taxes." Pause. "And as the sole heir, Harrison said I might be responsible for it." I watched the calculation happen behind Susan's eyes. The quick, frantic math. The realization. I wasn't just a neutral burden anymore. A piece of old furniture to be stored in the sunroom and eventually disposed of. I was now a liability. A financial anchor about to drag their already sinking ship straight to the bottom. "How much?" Susan asked. Her voice was flat now. Cold. He didn't know exactly, but he said it could be tens of thousands of dollars. The silence that filled that kitchen was absolute. It was the kind of silence that feels like the air before a storm. I looked down at the table, playing the part of the defeated, broken old woman to perfection. "I don't know what I'm going to do," I said, letting my voice crack. "My Social Security barely covers. I don't have—" I let the sentence die. And I waited. I waited for Robert, my son, my boy, to say, "Don't worry, Mom. We'll figure it out. We're family." I waited for him to put his hand on my shoulder like Michael would have done. But the silence just stretched on and on. Robert wouldn't look at me. He was staring at Susan, his face pale, waiting for her permission to speak, waiting for her to tell him what to do. And Susan wasn't looking at me either. She was staring at the wall just past my head, her face smooth blank, terrifying. She didn't look concerned. She didn't look sad. She looked trapped. And she looked disgusted. Finally, Susan moved. She pushed her chair back from the table. The legs made a violent scraping shriek against the linoleum. "Debts," she said, not loud, a hiss. "Debts." Robert flinched. "Susan, honey, calm down." "No." She stood up. Her hands were balled into tight white fists at her sides. She finally turned her gaze on me, and the mask was completely gone. There was no more concerned daughter-in-law. No more "we're family." Her eyes were narrowed, her face white with rage, so pure it was almost impressive. "Are you kidding me?" she shouted, and the word exploded in the small kitchen. "You're telling us you came back here with more debts, with IRS problems." "Susan, stop," Robert pleaded. His eyes were wide with a different kind of panic. "She just lost her father. I don't care," Susan wheeled on him. "She's not your father. She's a leech. We took her in. We gave her a home, our home. We feed her. We pay for her electricity, her water, her everything. And now this." She turned back to me, shaking with rage. "So you're bringing the IRS down on our house, on top of everything else." I don't know if they will," I stammered, holding on to my roll. The terrified old woman. "Harrison just said it was possible that—" "You're not just a burden anymore, old woman," she spat. The words were like venom. "You're a risk. You're a black hole. You're going to take us down with you." She was breathing hard, her chest heaving. I'd never seen her like this. The perfect suburban housewife mask had shattered completely. "Susan, please calm down." Robert tried again, his voice weak. We'll talk about this. We'll figure something out. Right, Dad? I mean, Mom, we can We can call the lawyer. Maybe there's call the lawyer with what money, Robert? Susan laughed. That awful bitter sound. With the money he doesn't have, with the money we don't have. She pointed at me, her finger shaking. No, I'm done. I am absolutely done. She turned her back rigid and stormed out of the kitchen. I heard her footsteps pound up the stairs. A second later, the bedroom door slammed shut. The vibration rattled the glasses in the kitchen cabinet. Robert and I sat in the awful silence she'd left behind. He was still standing by the counter, his shoulders slumped, completely defeated. He looked like a balloon that had been popped. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Robert, I whispered, made my voice small, fragile. He just shook his head, not at me but at the floor, at his own feet, at his life. I should go check on her mom, he said finally. His voice was barely audible. She's upset. She doesn't mean it. But he knew she meant it, and I knew she meant it. He turned and walked out of the kitchen, following his wife like a dog following its master. I was left alone at the table. The house was silent again, but this time I knew the truth. I knew what lived behind that silence. Slowly I got up from the chair. I made sure to shuffle my feet just in case they were listening. I walked back to my cold sunroom prison. I closed the sliding glass door that separated me from the rest of the house. Sat on the edge of the pull-out sofa, the springs groaning under my weight. I felt the hard, thick lump of the envelope in my coat pocket. $18 million. Well, $13.5 million soon once Harrison sold that farm. They had no idea. They had absolutely no idea what was coming for them. The next morning, everything changed. Not dramatically, quietly, like frost creeping across a window. I shuffled into the kitchen at 7 a.m. Susan was already there, dressed in her expensive-looking yoga pants and matching top. Her hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail. She was pouring coffee into a large, expensive mug. She didn't say good morning. Her eyes, when she glanced at me, were flat, cold, like looking at a stranger. Or worse, like looking at garbage she had to take out. I think I'll make some toast, I said quietly, playing my part. Bread's in the fridge, she said, not turning around. And don't use more than 2 slices. Robert needs to pack his lunch. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Got the bread, put 2 pieces in the toaster. The toaster that had been a wedding gift from Michael and me 15 years ago. I ate standing at this counter with a glass of tap water. The toast was dry. I hadn't asked for butter. It felt safer not to. Susan poured her coffee, added a splash of expensive cream from a carton I knew cost more than my entire breakfast, and walked right past me into the living room, as if I were invisible. After she left, I sat down in the living room. In my old armchair, the one Isla and I had bought together at a yard sale 30 years ago. The one Robert had wanted to throw away, but I'd asked to keep. That's when I saw it. On the coffee table, placed just so, was a glossy brochure, a trifold pamphlet. My eyesight isn't what it used to be, but I could make out the words on the front golden meadows, underneath a picture of 2 smiling silver-haired people, a man and a woman playing checkers on a perfectly manicured lawn. It looked like heaven. It was marketing for hell. My heart hammered in my chest, but I kept my face neutral. Susan, I called out softly. What's this, dear? She looked up from her phone, her face a mask of perfect innocence. What's what, Morgan? That paper on the table. She glanced at it as if seeing it for the first time. Oh, that. I don't know. Just some mail that came. I think it's for, seniors. Information about living options. She smiled at me. Bright, fake, terrible. It looked nice, she said. Just planning for the future, She went back to her phone. The message was clear. This is your future. Get used to it. That night, the cruelty became less subtle. I was in the sunroom at 6 p.m. reading an old paperback I'd read a dozen times before, the same Louis L'Amour Western. The pages were yellowed and soft. I smelled it before I saw it. The rich, savory smell of steak. Real steak searing in a pan. I heard the sizzle, heard Susan humming in the kitchen. My stomach rumbled. I'd had toast for breakfast, a banana for lunch. That was it. I waited. Surely they'd call me for dinner. We were family, after all. Even if things were tense, we still ate together. But no one called. I heard them talking. Heard the scrape of chairs, the clink of silverware on plates. Heard the TV in the living room turn on some cooking show, the volume turned up. An hour passed. The smells faded. My stomach was a knot of hunger and humiliation. Finally, around 8 o'clock, the sliding door to the sunroom opened. Robert stood there holding a small plate. On it was a piece of steak, but it was mostly gristle and fat, the parts no one wanted, and a spoonful of mashed potatoes, already congealed and cold. "Hey, Mom," he said, not meeting my eyes. His voice was too casual, too light. Sorry we didn't call you. Jess and I got to talking and, well, we made enough, though. Here." He handed me the plate like he was handing scraps to a dog. I took it. My hands were shaking, but not from weakness. "Thanks, son," I said quietly. "Yeah, well, good night, Mom." He slid the door shut, leaving me in darkness with my plate of cold leftovers. I sat there on that lumpy sofa looking at the food. The meat was tough, impossible to chew. The potatoes tasted like cardboard. This was the scrap, the part they would have thrown in the trash or given to a dog. I ate it anyway, because I was hungry, because I needed to keep my strength up, and because I needed them to think I was broken. It got worse. Over the next few days, the portions got smaller. When Susan made a big pot of chicken soup, I could smell it rich and savory. Robert brought me a bowl that was mostly broth, a few sad pieces of celery floating in watery liquid. "We're on a budget, Morgan," Susan explained one morning, catching me looking at the full pot on the stove. Her voice was bright, cheerful. "With your situation and the potential tax issues, we all have to tighten our belts. Every penny counts." She said it with a smile, a warning wrapped in sugar. "You are costing us. Remember that." Then came the cold. The sunroom had always been chilly, but I'd had a small electric space heater, one of those cheap ones from Walmart. But it was mine, and it had kept me from freezing on the coldest nights. On Wednesday night, I went to turn it on, clicked the switch. Nothing. I clicked it again, checked the plug. It was connected. The heater was dead. The next morning, I mentioned it to Susan. Tried to keep my voice light, not complaining, just informing. "Oh, really? That's a shame," she said, not looking up from her laptop, probably playing some online game. "Those things don't last forever. They're cheap. Robert will take a look when he has time." Robert never had time. The nights became a test of endurance. I slept in my coat. I woke up stiff, my bones aching from the damp cold. My arthritis flared up so badly some mornings I could barely open my hands. I was 70 years old, and I was freezing to death in my own son's house while they slept upstairs in their warm, comfortable bed. They were trying to break me, trying to make my life so miserable, so physically uncomfortable, that when they offered me Golden Meadows again, when they showed me those glossy brochures with the smiling old people, I would beg to go. But I wasn't broken. Not yet. Not ever. A week after I'd gotten back from Wyoming, the final petty cruelty arrived. I had a small 13-inch television in the sunroom. An old thing, probably 10 years old, but it worked. It was my only company in that cold glass box. I sat down one night exhausted from the cold and hunger and reached for the remote. It was gone. Not on the side table where I always left it. Not on the floor. Not tucked into the sofa cushions. I searched everywhere, my stiff fingers fumbling through the wicker furniture. It had vanished. The next morning I asked Susan, kept my voice mild, non-accusatory. "Susan, honey, have you seen the remote for my TV?" She frowned, tapping her chin in mock thought. "The remote number. Are you sure you didn't misplace it?" A pause. Then, with surgical precision, "You've been a little forgetful lately, Morgan." There it was. Forgetful. The first shot fired in the war for my mind. I don't think so," I said carefully. "I always leave it right on the table." "Well, it'll turn up," she said with a shrug. "Or not. To be honest, the doctor says too much television isn't good for—" She paused, letting the word hang in the air. "For cognitive decline. You're probably better off resting. Just rest your eyes, you know." I went back to my room. No heat, no television, just me, my books, and the cold. I sat on that sofa and I didn't feel broken. I felt like a piece of steel being forged in fire. They were hammering me, trying to make me weak, but they were just making me harder, stronger, more determined. I took the envelope out of my coat pocket. I'd been keeping it on me at all times, too afraid to leave it anywhere they might find it. I unfolded the asset summary one more time. $18 million. They were freezing a millionaire to death over a $20 space heater. They were starving a woman who could buy their entire neighborhood. I held that paper in my cold red hands and whispered to the empty freezing room, "You want to see forgetful? You want to see confused? I'll be the most pathetic, confused old woman you've ever seen, until the moment it matters." I must have drifted off because the sound that woke me wasn't gradual. It was a sharp, percussive thump that echoed from somewhere above me. The ceiling, their bedroom. I snapped awake, my heart leaping into my throat. The sunroom was pitch black except for the faint glow of the streetlight through the glass. I could see my own breath fogging in the cold air. My cheap digital clock read 3:15 a.m. I lay perfectly still listening. Then I heard it again. Not a thump, a voice. Susan's voice. And she wasn't hissing. She wasn't whispering. She was sobbing. "Robert, you have to do something." The words came through the ceiling, through the thin walls of this cheaply built house. "You have to." They called again. They didn't just call the house, they called my cell. My skin went cold, colder than the room already was. I pushed myself up off the sofa, my joints screaming in protest. I didn't bother with shoes. I crept barefoot across the icy tile floor to the sliding glass door that separated my prison from their home. The vertical blinds were cracked just barely. I pressed my face close my ear, almost touching the glass. "What do you want me to do, Susan?" Robert's voice. I'd never heard him sound like that. It wasn't weak. It wasn't tired. It was broken. It was the sound of a man who had nothing left. "I gave you everything," he said, his voice cracking. "I gave you the last of my 401k last month. You told me it was the last time. You promised it was the last time. It's gone, Susan. All of it. There's nothing left." My mind couldn't catch up. 401k. Last time for what? "It's not gone," Susan shrieked, but she choked the sound back into a desperate, strangled whisper. "I can win it back. I know I can." It was just a bad streak. "My system works, Robert. That last online site was rigged, I'm sure of it. If I can just make one more deposit, just another 1,000. Online site. Win it back. Bad streak. Oh my God. Gambling. She was talking about gambling. Robert laughed. It was the most terrible sound I'd ever heard from my son. It was a laugh with no air, no humor. It was the sound of a dead man laughing. "Susan, are you insane?" His voice rose. "We don't have $1,000. We don't have 100 the collection agency they called me yesterday. At my office. On my work phone, Susan. My boss heard." "Shh," she hissed. "Keep your voice down. You'll wake her. You'll wake your mother." "I don't care if she wakes up," Robert roared. I heard something hit the wall, his fist, his hand. "What's she going to do? Put us in her will. She's got nothing. She came back with debts. Susan debts." I flinched back from the glass as if he'd slapped me. My lie, my stupid perfect trap. It had worked better than I ever imagined. "We were counting on that." Robert, Susan's voice was a desperate whine now. "You told me his father was old. You said he had property. We were counting on that. It was our only way out. Our last chance." "Well, it didn't happen," Robert shouted. "She left us with more problems. She left us with IRS issues, with potential tax liability." There was a long, terrible silence. Then I heard Susan cry. Not angry sobs, deep, gulping, terrified sounds. "They're going to foreclose, aren't they?" Robert's voice went flat. Dead. "That certified letter we got yesterday. The one you said was junk mail. It wasn't junk mail, was it?" "We have 30 days, Susan whispered. Her voice was tiny, defeated. My blood stopped. Foreclosure. 30 days, Robert continued, his voice monotone, until they put the notice on the front door, until everyone on the street knows. "You should have thought of that before you started gambling online again," Robert said, and his voice was so cold it could have frozen the air. "Before you started with the online casinos." "I told you I could fix it," Susan shouted. "I was so close, so close. You've been fixing it for 6 months, he roared back. "You fixed my retirement account. You fixed the kids' college fund that Mom Isla left them. My mother's money, Susan. You gambled away my dead mother's gift to her grandchildren." I backed away from the door, stumbled back to the sofa, sat down hard. It wasn't just me. It wasn't just that I was an old woman in their way. They were desperate. They were drowning. Susan, my daughter-in-law, the smiling PTA, mom perfect housewife. Susan was a gambler, an online gambler. She had gambled away everything. Their retirement, The college fund Michael's wife Isla had so carefully set aside for grandchildren I'd never even known existed because they'd never brought them around. And Robert, my son, my only boy, he hadn't stopped her. He'd enabled her. Fed her addiction with his own retirement covered for her, lied for her until there was nothing left. I suddenly understood everything. The Golden Meadows brochures, the cold shoulders, the scraps of food. They hadn't just been mean. They'd been waiting. They'd been white-knuckling it for months, staring at the calendar, praying for my father to die. They saw my trip to Wyoming as a payday, as their salvation. They weren't hoping I'd bring back a little extra cash to help out. They were praying for a windfall, counting on it. It was their last, desperate final chance. And when I sat at that kitchen table a week ago, when I looked them in the eye and played my part, when I told them that beautiful, terrible lie, when I said that one simple word, debts, I hadn't just disappointed them. I had destroyed their last hope. I had been their final lottery ticket, and I'd come up a loser. I sat there in the pitch-black sunroom, listening to my son and his wife sobbing together in the kitchen above me. They were no longer angry. They were just broken. The war was over, and everyone had lost. Everyone except me. I let the silence sit for a full minute. Let them cry. Let them sit in the ruins they'd made. Then I pulled out my phone. The flip phone glowed blue in the darkness. 3:47 a.m. in Ohio. That meant 1:47 a.m. in Wyoming. I didn't care. I scrolled to Harrison's number and pressed call. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. Hello? His voice groggy but instantly alert when he heard my voice. Mrs. Byron. What's wrong? Harrison, I whispered, keeping my voice low. I need you to do something else for me. Something important. Of course. What do you need? I need you to investigate my daughter-in-law, Susan Byron. I overheard them talking. She's a gambler, online gambling. I think she's the reason they're losing the house. She mentioned owing money, something about $220,000. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. I need to know everything, I continued. How bad is it? How much does she owe? Who does she owe it to? I need proof, Harrison. Ammunition. You're asking me to run a private investigation on your daughter-in-law, Harrison said carefully. That's a different level of involvement. I'm asking you to protect your client's assets, I said, my voice sharp. This woman is trying to get guardianship of me. If she's this desperate, she won't stop. I need to know what I'm up against. I need to know exactly what kind of snake I'm living with. Pause. Can you do it, Din? Harrison sighed. I have a firm I use in Cheyenne for background checks. They have affiliates everywhere. It'll cost money. I have $18 million, Harrison, I said flatly. Find out. Find out everything. And fast. I'm on it, he said. The land sale, the trust, the investigation. Mrs. Byron, stay safe. And stay quiet. Act the part. Don't worry, I said, looking at my ghostly reflection in the dark glass. I'm just a confused old woman. I wouldn't know how to sign my own name, would I? I clicked the phone shut. When I shuffled into the kitchen the next morning, Susan was already there. She looked terrible. Her eyes were red and puffy, her skin blotchy. She'd been crying all night. But when she saw me, something shifted in her face, hardened. Good morning, Morgan, she said. Her voice was flat. I blinked at her, playing confused. Good morning, dear. I thought I heard noises last night. Is everything all right? Everything's fine, she said curtly. We just had some things to discuss. Robert came down the stairs. He looked worse than Susan, like he hadn't slept at all. His eyes were bloodshot, his face drawn. Morning, Mom, he mumbled. Robert, honey, I said, letting my voice quaver. Are you feeling all right? You look tired. I'm fine, Mom. Just work stress. They stood there in the kitchen, the two of them, and I could feel the shift. Something had changed in the night. Some decision had been made. Susan poured coffee, her movements sharp and angry. She handed Robert a cup, didn't offer me one. Then she turned to me, and her eyes were calculating. Cold. Morgan, she said, Robert and I have been talking. About your situation. About the debts and the potential tax issues. I widened my eyes. Made myself look vulnerable. Oh, we're very worried about you. She continued each word carefully chosen. You're under a lot of stress. You're forgetting things. You're not eating well. You're clearly overwhelmed. Robert jumped in right on cue. We think you need help, Mom. Professional help. My heart started pounding, but I kept my face neutral, confused. Help? What kind of help? Susan moved closer, sat down across from me at the table, put on her concerned face the mask she was so good at wearing. We found someone, she said gently. A doctor, Dr. Greg Smith. He's a friend of the family. He specializes in senior health issues, helping people who are feeling overwhelmed. There it was, Dr. Smith. I remembered that name now. The man from their 4th of July barbecue 2 years ago. The one drinking beer and laughing too loudly about his golf game. He wasn't a geriatric specialist. He was a psychologist. They weren't bringing a doctor to check my blood pressure. They were bringing someone to sign a piece of paper. A paper that would say Morgan Byron is confused, disoriented, forgetful, incapable of managing her own affairs. A paper that would be attached to an emergency guardianship petition they'd file at the courthouse by noon tomorrow. By this time tomorrow, I wouldn't be Morgan Byron anymore. I'd be a ward, a piggy bank, an ATM for Susan to raid. They'd have access to my pension, my Social Security, and then, oh God, then they'd file the paperwork. They'd get access to everything. They'd find out about the inheritance. Susan wouldn't just be paying off her debts. She'd be hitting the biggest jackpot of her miserable, addicted life. I had to play this perfectly. I let my bottom lip tremble, let my eyes go wide with childlike fear. A doctor, I said. I don't need a doctor. I'm just tired, Susan. Just cold. Shh, it's okay, Susan cooed, reaching across the table to pat my hand. Her palm was warm. Mine was ice cold. It's not a real doctor visit. It's just a conversation. He's just going to ask you a few questions. About your memory. About how you're feeling. She smiled that terrible smile. It's just a formality. For insurance purposes. You understand, right? Lies piled on lies piled on lies. I don't want to, I whispered, trying to pull my hand away, making my protest weak, ineffective. Susan's voice hardened just for a second, the steel underneath the velvet. Morgan, don't be difficult. Then it smoothed out again. We're doing this for you, because we love you. Dr. Smith is coming tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. You just need to be right here in this chair, ready to talk. Okay. I slumped back, let my shoulders fall, nodded weakly. Okay, Susan, I whispered, if you think it's best. We do, she said firmly. She stood up, mission accomplished. Now you go rest, big day tomorrow. She and Robert left the kitchen. I heard them talking in low voices in the living room, planning, preparing. That night after they'd gone to bed, I heard it again, the quiet metallic click of the lock on the sliding glass door. They'd locked me in, just in case the confused old woman decided to go for a wander before the doctor could arrive. I sat there in the dark on that lumpy sofa, the cold seeping into my bones. The final trap was set. The evaluation was in less than 15 hours. But they didn't know what I knew. They didn't know about Harrison working through the night investigating Susan's gambling addiction. They didn't know about the $4.5 million sitting safely in an irrevocable trust. They didn't know about the other $13.5 million in property I still owned. They thought I was a scared old woman with nothing but debts and dementia. Tomorrow, Dr. Greg Smith would walk through that door at 10 a.m. sharp, and tomorrow they would find out exactly how wrong they were. I pulled my coat tighter around my shoulders and smiled in the darkness. Let them think they'd won. Let them think I was trapped. Tomorrow the trap would spring, and they were the ones inside it. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I sat on that pull-out sofa in the locked sunroom, wrapped in my coat, watching the darkness slowly fade to gray, watching the first light of dawn creep across the frozen glass walls. My phone buzzed at 6:15 a.m. A text from Harrison Farm sold. Wire transfer complete. Trust funded. $4.5 million secure. Investigation results incoming within the hour. Stay strong. I read it 3 times, then deleted it immediately. No evidence. Not yet. At 6:30, I heard them stirring upstairs. The creak of bed springs. Footsteps. The shower running. They were getting ready. Preparing for their victory. At 7 o'clock, I heard the lock on the sliding door click open. Susan appeared, already dressed, her face carefully made up. She'd covered the dark circles under her eyes with concealer. Put on lipstick. She looked almost normal. Almost. "Good morning, Morgan," she said brightly, too brightly. "Did you sleep well?" I blinked at her slowly, rubbed my eyes like I was confused about where I was. Is it morning already?" "Yes, dear. Come on, let's get you settled in the living room. Dr. Smith will be here in a few hours. We want you comfortable." She helped me up, actually took my elbow and guided me like I was an invalid. Through the kitchen into the living room. Robert was there standing by the fireplace. He was wearing khakis and a button-down shirt, dressed up, like this was an interview. I guess it was. "Hey, Mom," he said. His voice was strained, guilty. "How are you feeling?" I let myself sway a little, put my hand on the arm of my old chair for support. "Tired," I said softly. "So tired." Susan fluffed a pillow behind my back, tucked a blanket around my legs, playing the concerned daughter-in-law for an audience of no one. Or maybe for themselves. Maybe they needed to believe they were the good guys in this story. "There we go," she said. "Nice and comfortable. Can I get you some water?" "Yes, please," I whispered. She brought me my plastic cup filled with tap water, set it on the side table within reach. "Now," she said, sitting on the edge of the sofa leaning forward, "Dr. Smith is going to ask you some questions. Easy questions. Just about how you're feeling what you remember. There's nothing to be nervous about." "Will it take long?" I asked, my voice small. "No, honey. Not long at all. Just a quick chat." Robert cleared his throat. "Mom, we're doing this because we care about you. You understand that, right?" I nodded slowly. Let my eyes fill with tears. "I understand," I said. Liar. I understood perfectly. The next 2 hours were the longest of my life. Susan made breakfast scrambled eggs and toast, but only brought me a single piece of dry toast. Robert ate at the kitchen table. I could hear them talking in low voices. My phone buzzed again at 8:47 a.m. Another text from Harrison. This one longer. I read it in the bathroom, the only place I could lock the door. "Investigation complete. It's worse than you thought. Susan Byron, $220,000 in gambling debts across multiple online platforms. Payday loans forged loan applications using Robert's info. But worse, she took out a second mortgage on your son's house 6 months ago, $50,000. Forged his signature. Lost it all in one weekend. Has not made a single payment. The house is already in foreclosure. Auction scheduled for this Friday. Robert doesn't know about the second mortgage. She's been hiding it. They have 3 days before the bank takes the house. Sending full documentation to your email. You have everything you need." My hands shook as I deleted the message. 3 days. The house was already gone. The 30 days Susan had mentioned that wasn't a deadline. That was last week. The grace period was over. In 72 hours, the bank was going to kick them and me to the curb. That's why Susan was so desperate, so frantic. This wasn't just a plan to get rid of me. This wasn't just about my pension. This was a last-ditch, frantic Hail Mary pass. She was hoping to get guardianship, find some assets, any assets, maybe the inheritance she thought I was hiding. Use it to plug the gaping, bleeding wound in their finances before Robert found out she hadn't just bankrupted them. She'd made them homeless. The doctor wasn't just her key to Golden Meadows. He was her key to survival. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 a.m. Susan practically leaped off the sofa. "That's him. That's Dr. Smith." She smoothed her hair, checked her reflection in the mirror by the door, and opened it with a smile so bright it could have lit up the room. "Greg, thank you so much for coming on such short notice." "Of course, Susan. Anything to help." His voice was smooth, professional, practiced. Doctor. Greg Smith walked into the living room and I recognized him immediately. Mid-50s, perfect gray hair, expensive suit that probably cost more than my truck. He carried a polished leather briefcase. He looked at me and his practiced professional smile clicked into place like a mask. "And this must be Morgan," he said warmly, extending his hand. I just blinked at him, let my eyes go wide and watery, didn't take his hand, let mine tremble in my lap instead. His smile didn't falter. He pulled the ottoman closer and sat down, leaning in. His posture screamed concern and empathy, all fake, all performance. "Morgan," he began, his voice soft and soothing like he was talking to a frightened child. "My name is Greg Smith. I'm a friend of Susan's. I'm here because Susan and Robert told me you've been going through a very difficult time." I nodded. A small, weak movement. Losing your father, that's a tremendous loss, he continued. And then this news about his estate, the financial stress. That's a lot for anyone to handle, isn't it? Another nod. Susan tells me you've been feeling a little forgetful lately. Is that right? Sometimes feeling confused. I could see the script laid out in front of me, the trap they were setting. He would ask me simple questions. What's the date? Who's the president? Where are you? I would answer them, maybe get a few wrong, maybe seem disoriented. Then he would twist it. He would say, your family says you're confused and you seem agitated. You're denying your symptoms, which is itself a symptom. It was perfect. Airtight. Susan jumped in right on cue. It's okay, Morgan. Just tell the doctor. Remember the remote, how you couldn't find it. I looked at Dr. Smith, his kind eyes, his lying smile, and I made my decision. This was the moment. This was where everything changed. I took a slow, deep breath. Then I sat up straight in my chair, let my spine become steel. When I spoke, my voice was not the weak whisper of a confused old woman. It was clear. It was cold. It was the voice of a 70-year-old woman who had run quality control at an auto plant for 40 years, who had raised a son alone after her husband died, who had survived. You can leave now, Dr. Smith. The room froze. Dr. Smith's smile faltered, stuck on his face like a piece of broken machinery. I beg your pardon. You heard me, I said. My gaze locked on his, unwavering. You can leave. You're not here to help. You're here to sign a piece of paper. You're here to commit perjury. You're here to help them steal my pension and my Social Security. His face went from pale to a blotchy red. Now see here, Mrs. Byron, that is a very serious accusation. And it's a serious crime, I said, my voice cutting through his bluster like a knife. I know who you are, Greg. I remember you from the barbecue 2 years ago. You're a family psychologist, not a geriatric specialist. And I'm not your patient. I leaned forward slightly. So I'll say it again. You can leave my house. Your house? Susan shrieked, shooting to her feet. This is my house. I turned my gaze to her, slowly, deliberately. Is it Susan? I asked quietly. Or am I just someone with very good hearing? The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Susan's face went white, actually white like all the blood had drained from it. Golden Meadows, I said, each word deliberate. It's her or us, and I'm choosing us. Every single word, Susan. Through the door, I heard every single word. Dr. Smith didn't need to hear more. He'd seen enough. He snapped his briefcase shut and stood up so fast the ottoman nearly tipped over. I think I'm in the wrong place, he said quickly. This is clearly a private family matter. I should be going. Yes, I said. You should. He practically ran to the door. It opened and closed, and then he was gone. The silence he left behind was absolute. Just me, my son, and his wife. Robert was staring at me, his mouth slightly open, his face completely pale. Susan was breathing hard, her chest heaving, her hands clenched into fists. You spied on us, she whispered. Her voice shook with rage. No, I said calmly. I listened. And then for 8 days I watched you. You pretended, Susan screamed. All week you sat there pretending to be sick, pretending to be confused. I didn't have to pretend very hard, did I? I said. You made it easy. The cold room, the stolen remote, the scraps of food. I stood up from the chair. For the first time in months, I felt strong, powerful. You locked me in last night, Susan, I said quietly. Robert, your wife locked your mother in a room like an animal. Robert's head snapped toward Susan. What, Susan? You locked her in. It was for her own good, Susan shouted. She's clearly not well. She's senile. She's lying. She's making all this up. Am I lying about Golden Meadows, Susan? I asked. She flinched, actually took a step back. Am I lying about you calling me a leech, a financial black hole? I took a step toward her. You did all this because you thought I was poor, because you thought I was worthless, because you thought I was a burden. You are! She spat, her composure completely gone. You came here with nothing but debts. You're a leech. That, I said, and my voice was suddenly calm, dangerously calm. That is where you are wrong. Susan stopped, her mouth still open. Her eyes narrowed with confusion. What did you say? I said you're wrong, I repeated. And that's because I lied. Robert finally moved, finally looked at me instead of at his wife. Lied, Mom, what lie? I looked at him. My son, my boy. My father Hector, he didn't leave me debts, I said. I let each word land like a stone dropping into still water. He didn't leave me taxes. He didn't leave me nothing. Beat. He left me $18 million. Silence. Not just quiet. Silence. The kind of silence that has weight, that presses against your eardrums. Robert's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Susan just stared. Her face went through a dozen expressions in 3 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, shock, then understanding, then something that looked like physical pain. What? The word came out of her mouth like a whisper, like a prayer. What did you just say, $18 million, I repeated. My voice was flat, matter of fact. 3 farms in Wyoming with active natural gas leases, and a house on the ocean in Maine. The lawyer's estimate is $18 million. Robert made a sound, a sort of strangled gasp. Susan's hand flew to her mouth. And then the mask didn't just crack. It shattered. A sound tore out of Susan's throat, not a word, a high-pitched, strangled scream of pure, unadulterated joy. 18 million, she shrieked. Her face, which had been paper white, flooded with a blotchy red color. Robert, did you hear 18? She spun so fast she almost fell, grabbed Robert's arms with both hands. Robert, your mother just said, did you hear what she said, 18 million, 18? Before I could move, before I could react, Susan flew at me. Her arms locked around my neck in a hug so tight I couldn't breathe. I could smell her hairspray, her expensive perfume mixed with the sour smell of desperation and sweat. You were joking, she cried into my shoulder, her voice muffled. Oh, you terrible, wonderful, terrible woman, a joke. That's what it was, the debts, the taxes. You were playing a joke on us. She pulled back her hands, gripping my shoulders so hard it hurt. Her face was tear-streaked mascara running, but her eyes were dancing, bright and hard and calculating. We're rich, she yelled, looking back at Robert. We're rich. Then she turned back to me, that terrifying smile stretched across her face. Oh, Mom. Oh, we're so sorry. You must have been so upset thinking we believed you. We were just playing along with your little joke, weren't we, Robert? She looked at Robert, her eyes demanding he agree with her. Robert just stood there, staring, his face completely pale, looking sick. We knew you were kidding, Susan continued, her voice dropping back into that syrupy spider-to-fly tone. Of course we did. Right, Robert? But Robert wasn't celebrating. He was looking at his wife. And for the first time, maybe for the very first time, he was seeing the monster. Susan wouldn't let go of me. Her grip on my shoulders was bruising. You don't have to go anywhere, she babbled. Golden Meadows, what a silly, horrible idea that was. Of course you're staying here. We'll take care of you. We'll take care of everything right here. Her voice became frantic, desperate. We can build an addition, a whole new wing on the house. We'll knock out the kitchen wall, give you your own apartment, your own kitchen, and a heater. A brand new state-of-the-art heater, whatever you want. A new car. We'll go on a cruise. She hugged me again. Not a hug of love, a hug of possession. Like a parasite that had just found a new, healthy, very, very rich host. I looked over Susan's shoulder at my son. Robert was watching his wife, and he wasn't celebrating. He looked horrified. Slowly, carefully, I put my hands on Susan's shoulders. Didn't push, just created space, just enough to see her face. Happy? I said. The word came out quiet. Is that what this is, Susan, happiness? Her manic smile flickered. I'm just relieved we're all relieved. Or is it just relief, I asked. I looked at her, really looked at her. $18 million. That's a lot of money. It's a miracle, isn't it? She nodded frantically. Yes, it is. But I have to ask. I paused. Let the tension build. Let her panic rise. Is it enough? Her smile froze. Enough for what? It's 18 million. Is it enough, though? I said, my voice quiet but cutting, to pay off the $220,000. The words hung in the air like a bomb. $220,000. If 18 million had sucked the air out of the room, 220,000 brought the frost. Susan's face didn't just go pale. It went white, waxy, bloodless, terrifying. She looked like a mannequin, a corpse. Robert made a sound. A small gulping choking sound like he'd been gut punched. His eyes, which had been locked on his wife with dawning horror, flew to me. "Mom," he whispered. His voice was shaking. What did you just say, 200, what?" I didn't look at Robert. Not yet. I kept my eyes locked on Susan. "You heard me," I said. $220,000. That's a lot of online sports betting, Susan. That's a lot of digital poker tables. I, Susan stammered. She took a step back, her hand flying to her mouth. She looked at Robert, her eyes wide with terror that had nothing to do with me. "She's lying," Susan said. "She's confused. She's senile. She's just saying numbers." "Am I?" I asked. "Am I making up the online loan applications, the ones you forged his signature on the payday loans, the markers, the collection agency that's been calling Robert's office?" "Susan," Robert said. His voice wasn't a whisper anymore. It was low, deep, dangerous. "Susan, what is she talking about? She's lying," Susan shrieked, backing away from me toward the kitchen. "She's an old, bitter woman, and she's trying to turn you against me." "She's talking about the foreclosure, isn't she?" I said quietly. "Isn't she, Susan?" That was the word. That was the kill shot. Foreclosure. Robert crumbled. His legs seemed to give out. He stumbled forward away from the fireplace, his gaze unfocused. "No," he whispered. No. We're just late, you said. You said we were 30 days late. You said we could catch up." "She lied, Robert," I said. My voice was gentle now, sad. "She didn't just get behind. She took out a second mortgage 6 months ago for $50,000. She forged your name on the documents." I paused. "And she lost it all in one weekend." Robert's knees hit the floor. He didn't scream. He didn't make a sound. He just dropped like a puppet with cut strings. He put his hands on his head, his fingers digging into his hair, and he rocked back and forth. "No," he whispered to the carpet. No. "Susan, you promised. You promised me you stopped. You swore to me. My retirement, the kids' college fund, Mom Isla's money for the grandkids. Susan, you promised." I watched my son break apart on his living room floor, and I turned to Susan. Susan was backed against the kitchen counter now, her eyes darting between me and the broken man on the floor. The trap was closed. She was caught. And then she exploded. The panic, the lies, the terror, it all erupted into pure white-hot rage. "So what?" she screamed, her voice cracking. "So what if I did? You didn't give me a choice. You and your useless mother living here sucking us dry. I had to do something. I could have won it back. I was so close. So close." Robert looked up from the floor, tears streaming down his face. "My God," he whispered. "Oh my God, Susan." "It's her fault," Susan shrieked, pointing at me with a shaking finger. "She did this. She came back with her lies, her debts, and she ruined everything. I could have fixed it. I just needed more time." She was a cornered animal now, spitting and clawing at anyone within reach. Robert slowly pushed himself to his feet. He looked at his wife, really looked at her, and I saw something die in his eyes. "You didn't just make a mistake," he said quietly. "You destroyed us. You destroyed everything. And you tried to destroy my mother." Susan's rage drained away as quickly as it had come. The realization of what she'd lost, what she'd almost had in her grasp, hit her like a physical blow. $18 million. Her knees buckled. She slid down the wall, her legs giving out, and she just sat on the kitchen floor, surrounded by the fake, perfect, foreclosed life she'd built. She put her head in her hands and began to cry. Not the angry shrieks, not the hysterical sobs. This was quiet, hopeless, the sound of absolute final defeat. I let the silence sit, let them both absorb what had just happened. Then I cleared my throat. They both flinched, like they'd forgotten I was there. "Well," I said, "now that we're all being honest." Susan looked up, her face a mess of ruined makeup and tears. What do you want?" "What I want," I said, "is to go to a home where I'm not freezing to death. What I want is to not be called a leech by the woman who's been gambling away my son's future. What I want is to know why my son, my own son, would agree to throw his mother into a state-run nursing home." Robert finally moved. He turned to me, his face hollow with shame. "Mom," he whispered. I didn't. She told me we had no choice. She told me if we didn't cut expenses starting with you, we'd lose everything. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know why we were losing everything. I didn't know about the second mortgage. You just thought, I said quietly, it was easier to get rid of me. He didn't answer. He just looked at the floor, and that was all the answer I needed. Well, I said, I have good news for you both. Susan looked up, that tiny, pathetic spark of hope in her eyes. Good news. Yes, you were right about one thing. I am a burden. I'm a 70-year-old widow living in your sunroom. I am a problem. I looked at both of them. And you have so many problems right now. The foreclosure, the gambling addiction, the complete destruction of your marriage. The last thing you need is a confused old woman wandering around. Susan scrambled to her feet. Wait, we can fix this. The $18 million, it fixes everything. It pays off the house. It pays off all of it. We can be a family again, just like you wanted. She was smiling again. That bright, terrifying, greedy smile. She still didn't see the problem. She just saw the money. She saw the ATM had been restocked. That's the thing, Susan, I said. I reached into my coat pocket. My hand passed over the thick envelope with the will. I pulled out my old flip phone instead. Held it up. It's not we. It's my money. Robert's eyes focused on the phone. Mom, what does that mean? It means, I said that I've been a very busy woman. I made a phone call. A few, actually. Susan's face went from hopeful to wary. You what? That farm. The one worth $4.5 million, I sold it. This morning, a consortium in Wyoming bought it. You sold it? Susan's voice was faint. But where's the money? It's gone, I said simply. Gone, she shrieked. What do you mean gone? Did you gamble it away? The irony of the question was so thick I could barely breathe. No, Susan, I said. I'm not like you. I didn't lose it. I moved it. Moved it where? Into an irrevocable trust. A trust that only I can touch. A trust that no son, no daughter-in-law, and no court-appointed guardian can ever get their hands on. Susan's face went blank. The smile, the hope, the greed, it all just switched off like a light. So you see, I said, I'm taken care of. I have $4.5 million that you can't touch, that no one can touch but me. I started walking toward the front door. Wait, Robert yelled, running after me. Mom, wait, where are you going? You can't just leave. I turned at the door, my hand on the knob. I said. You were right, Robert. I'm a burden, and I'm done being your burden. But the house, his voice cracked with desperation. The foreclosure, in 3 days, Mom. You have the money, you can stop it, you can save us. Susan was behind him now, her face a mask of pleading. He's right, Morgan. Please, we made a mistake, a horrible mistake, but you can fix it. You're the only one who can. I looked at them, my son the coward, my daughter-in-law the predator, both of them finally united begging me for money, and I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was my father Hector's smile, hard, cold. Oh, I said. The house. I almost forgot. Dad, Mom, Robert stammered. You don't have to worry about the foreclosure. I'll figure it out. You don't have to worry about it either, son, I said. It's already taken care of. A wave of pure flooding relief washed over Robert's face. He actually sagged against the doorframe. Oh, God. Mom, thank you. I knew you wouldn't. Don't thank me, I said, cutting him off. I didn't do it for you. Robert blinked. What do you mean? I mean the bank isn't going to foreclose on this house. Susan let out a sob of relief. Thank God. The bank isn't foreclosing, I said, my voice like ice, because the bank doesn't own this house anymore. Susan's relief turned to confusion. What about? As of 9 o'clock this morning, I said my trust bought the debt. Both mortgages. The first one and the secret fraudulent one you took out, Susan. I let that sink in. I paid it all off. Paid every cent. The bank was happy to sell. They got their money. They're out of the picture. You saved us, Susan whispered. You saved us, Morgan. I knew. I'm not finished, I said. I pulled an envelope from my other coat pocket, the one Harrison had overnighted to a P.O. box I'd set up. I own the debt, I said. I own the note, which means I own this house. I am your landlord, I am your creditor. I am the person you owe $220,000 to, plus the balance of the original mortgage. I tossed the envelope onto the floor between them. It landed with a soft, final thump. That, I said, is a 30-day eviction notice. I'm terminating your tenancy. You have 30 days to get your things and get out of my house. The silence that followed was like a physical thing. Susan didn't move. She just stared at the envelope on the floor. Eviction. Notice. Robert's voice was a stranger's voice. You're kicking us out. I'm removing non-paying tenants from my property, I said. It's just business. Business. Susan suddenly found her voice again. She lunged forward, not at me, but at Robert, grabbed him by the arms, shook him. This is our life, she screamed into his face. Robert, do something! Robert grabbed her wrists, pulled her hands off him. For the first time, I saw something like anger in his eyes. Not at me, at her. Do something, he said, his voice low, dangerous. Do something, Susan. You did this. You lied to me. You lied about the money. You lied about the house. You lied about everything. I didn't know she had money, Susan screamed, clawing at him. How could I know? I thought she was poor. She wasn't dragging us down, Robert roared. You were with your gambling. You gambled away my mother's money, the money Mom Isla left for the grandkids. You gambled away our house. It was ugly. It was raw. It was the truth of their marriage exploding in front of me. And then Susan collapsed, fell to her knees right there in the doorway and started to cry. Real tears this time. Not manipulation, just despair. Robert just stood there looking down at the woman he'd married, the woman who'd destroyed everything. I didn't wait for more. I didn't need to see more. I opened the front door. The cool morning air hit my face like a blessing. Behind me, I heard Susan call my name. Morgan, please. We have nowhere to go. What are we supposed to do? I stopped in the doorway, looked back one last time at the two of them. A ruined man and a desperate woman standing in the middle of a house that was no longer theirs. Honestly, Susan, I said quietly, I don't care. I walked out, down the cracked concrete path, past the rose bushes that needed trimming. I got into my old truck, the one with the $13.5 million fortune still waiting for me in Wyoming and Maine. I started the engine. As I pulled away from the curb, I saw Robert stumble out onto the front lawn, just standing there, watching me leave. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I just kept driving. I drove east. For 2 days, I just drove. Stopped at a cheap motel in Pennsylvania, the kind with thin walls and a plastic ice bucket. I paid cash. I sat on that strange, stiff bed and ate a bag of peanuts for dinner. I had $4.5 million in a trust and another $13.5 million in property, and I'd never felt more alone in my entire life. But I wasn't a victim. I wasn't a ghost. I was just done. The next morning I kept driving. Followed something I couldn't name, a pull I didn't understand. I drove until the air changed, until it stopped smelling like damp Ohio earth and started smelling like sharp pine and cold, clean salt. I drove to Maine. I found it on the 3rd day, 14 Lighthouse Road, Cutler, Maine. It wasn't a mansion. It was a small, gray shingled house perched on a cliff looking out over the Atlantic Ocean. It was weathered, strong. It looked like it belonged there. It looked like Hector. I unlocked the door with the key Harrison had sent. The air inside was still and cold, but it was a clean cold. It smelled of old wood and the sea. There was a bed, a solid table, one good chair facing the ocean. It was more than the sunroom had ever been. It was mine. I slept for 12 hours straight. When I woke up, I made coffee in the small kitchen, sat on the tiny wind-blasted porch and watched lobster boats pulling their traps in the early morning fog. The life of Morgan Byron, the burden was over. The next day I called Harrison. Morgan, he said, relief flooding his voice. We were starting to worry. Where did you go? I'm in Maine, I said. At the house. Harrison, I want you to sell everything else. The other 2 farms. Everything except this house. Morgan, that's over $14 million. I know exactly what it is, I said. And I know exactly what I want to do with it. I told him my plan. The Michael and Hector Byron Trust. A foundation. A nonprofit. Not a charity that just hands out checks. A legal weapon. dedicated to one thing: providing immediate aggressive legal aid and emergency housing for the elderly, for people being financially abused, neglected, or exploited by their own families, for every woman like me freezing in a sunroom, for every man told he's forgetful while his children drain his bank accounts, for every grandmother told she's a burden while being bled dry. We would be their lawyers, their shield, their warriors. When I finished explaining, Harrison was silent for a long moment. "My God, Morgan," he finally said. His voice was thick with emotion. "Hector would be so incredibly proud of that." "I think so too," I said, looking out at the endless gray water. "I think he finally is." I sat on that porch for a long time after the call ended, and for the first time in my life I understood my father. All my life I'd seen him as hard, cold, a man who worked in the mines and kept to himself, a man who disapproved of everything I did. But I'd learned something, a secret. 60 years ago, Hector Byron, a simple miner with barely any money, found a young man in a bar, Alfred Thorne, a man about to lose his family business, and my father gave that stranger his entire life savings, $30,000. An impossible sum back then. He'd saved Alfred's life, and he'd never told anyone. My father didn't do it for recognition. He didn't do it for praise. He just did it because he saw someone vulnerable and he protected them. That was his real legacy. Not the $18 million. The example. He'd been quietly building his fortune, living like a pauper while sitting on a dragon's hoard. But he'd used his strength not to bully, but to shield. And now I understood what I had to do with his gift. The foundation took 6 months to build. It was hard work. Good work. Harrison moved to Maine to run it. "I'm tired of Wyoming wind," he said with a smile. "I want to try the lobster." We'd already helped 12 people, stopped 3 guardianships in court, moved 4 seniors out of abusive homes into safe, clean apartments. We'd become the people who answer the 3 a.m. call. My life was quiet now. Good. The Ohio house sold in a day. I never asked where Robert and Susan went. I didn't need to know. My old flip phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon. I almost didn't answer. I didn't recognize the Ohio number, but something made me pick up. "Mom," Robert's voice, thin, rough, like he'd been crying. "Hello, son," I said. Silence, long and painful. I could hear traffic in the background, construction sounds. I'm in a new place," he finally said. "A small apartment, on the west side of Columbus. It's not much, but it's clean." "That's good, Robert." "And I got a job, at a construction site, just labor. But it's work, it's honest." "That's good too." Another pause. "Susan's in a program, a 90-day residential program, for the gambling." "I'm glad to hear that." We're separated, for good, I think." "I'm sorry, son." "Don't be," he said quietly. "It had to happen." Silence again, the kind that aches. Then, "Mom, I know I have no right. I know that. I'm not calling for money. I swear I'm not. I'm paying my own rent. I'm working." "I know," I said. "It's just," his voice cracked. "Thanksgiving is next month. And I was wondering if maybe, just for the day, could I come visit? I'll drive myself. I'll pay for my own gas. I don't want to be alone, Mom." I looked out the window, at the ocean, that big, gray, endless water. I thought about Hector, about Michael, about the family I'd had and the one I'd lost. Healing isn't a straight line. It's a long, hard road, and it has to start with the truth. He'd told me the truth. He was working. Susan was in rehab. He was getting help. He wasn't asking for money. It was a start. "Bring a pumpkin pie, son," I said quietly. "Mom." His voice broke, like he was crying. "Really? And don't get the cheap store-bought kind," I said, my voice rough. "Your father hated those." A sound on the other end. Might have been a laugh. Might have been a sob. "Okay, Mom," he whispered. "Okay, I will." I hung up the phone. The road back would be long. For both of us. But I guess it had to start somewhere. I sat there as the sun set over the Atlantic, painting the sky in gold and rose. My story could have ended in that cold sunroom. I could have been just another file in a cabinet at Golden Meadows. Another confused old woman whose family bled her dry and moved on. But I learned something the hard way. Sometimes the people closest to you, the ones who call you mom, are the ones who will hurt you the most. They see your grief as weakness, your age as confusion, and your life savings as their inheritance. If you feel like you're being treated like a burden, trust that feeling. Protect yourself. Setting boundaries, protecting your assets, even telling a hard lie to see the truth that's not cruel. That's survival. My father taught me that true strength isn't just having money. It's using your power to protect the vulnerable. And sometimes that vulnerable person is you. If my story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It truly warms this old woman's heart to see the support. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story I have to tell. I'd love to know, where are you watching from tonight? What time is it in your part of the world? And tell me in the comments, what do you think? Was I too harsh? Or was this the only way? Have you ever had to deal with someone like Susan in your own life? I'll be reading your comments. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next story.